Imagine the scene at number 10 Downing Street. The tea is cold, the atmosphere colder, and the Chancellor, Exchequer Rachel Reeves, has just realised that in the ruthless game of political musical chairs, the music has stopped and Keir Starmer has personally pulled her seat out from under her, triggering a full-blown civil war at the heart of the British government, with the first casualty being the woman who holds the purse strings. This is no mere spreadsheet disagreement. It is a calculated execution of a political career. As the man who prides himself on being the sensible adult in the room apparently decided that the best way to save his own skin after a series of monumental blunders is to offer up his Chancellor's head on a silver platter. And if you're loving this breakdown of chaos across the pond, hit subscribe. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet, and it's the only way to. Stay updated on how these geopolitical tremors affect us here in Canada. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us, thanks if you did. Now back to the demolition of Downing Street decorum, the scapegoat strategy, tossing Reeves overboard in a system that thrives on pretended etiquette, shattered by reality, as the British political establishment faces a potentially devastating election defeat this May. With wipeouts looming in the Scottish and Welsh parliaments and a bloodbath across English local elections. And in this high-stakes world, when the ship is sinking, the captain looks for someone to lighten the load, and insiders say Starmer has lost every ounce of patience for Reeves, pinning her for every unpopular decision since taking office. From cutting pensioners' winter fuel payments to planned disability benefit reductions that have sparked revolt among Labour backbenchers. One bluntly declaring that someone's head must roll, and Keir is determined it won't be his. Executing the ultimate, it's not me, it's you break up, except over the fate of the UK economy, sharpening the axe now after a trail of political wreckage left behind by Reeves's tenure. We've had the winter fuel payment fiasco, a move so unpopular it made Scrooge look like a philanthropist. The proposed cuts to disability benefits that were eventually abandoned under mass pressure, leaving the government looking both cruel and incompetent, and the business rates debacle for pubs and hospitality firms slammed as a monumental avoidable cock-up. Because by ending COVID-era reliefs while reducing headline rates, Reeves inadvertently hit pubs with a 76% tax increase. A kick in the nuts delivered with all the grace of a sledgehammer, with Starmer seeing his approval ratings plummet to record lows, flirting with historic Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss levels of public loathing. He has decided the only way to fix the foundations is to replace the person who designed them. And the drama only escalated with the China trip snub that sent Reeves into a literal tailspin as, while Starmer jets off to Beijing for a high-profile 3-day summit in late January 2026, she was initially left out of the headline optics, only later shoehorned in on a separate itinerary, leaving her spitting feathers and pacing the Treasury halls while Starmer rubs shoulders with business leaders and Chinese officials attempting to look like a world leader as his own government burns at home. A snub so public that even optimistic Labour supporters are seeing the writing on the wall, with number 11 silent and optics disastrous, since usually the person in charge of the economy is the star of such trips, making this awkward theatre painfully obvious. And as if that weren't enough, the panic spreads to the upcoming Gorton and Denton by-election, where Starmer has ordered all 404 Labour MPs to campaign in a desperate bid to avoid a humiliating defeat on February 26th. Because bookmakers have Reform candidate Matt Goodwin as a serious contender to flip a seat Labour has held for over 90 years. The fortress walls crumbling after leadership blocked the popular Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham from standing. They were so afraid of Burnham's popularity overshadowing Starmer potentially sparking a leadership challenge, that they effectively handed the keys of Manchester to the opposition, the political equivalent of benching your star player in the finals because he might get more cheers than the coach. The King of the North was told he couldn't run because the party didn't want the expense of a mayoral by-election. But the truth is, Starmer was terrified, convincing colleagues during a National Executive Committee meeting, where the vote was an overwhelming 8-1 against Burnham, that keeping him out was about resource management, when in reality it was about survival. Yet, blocking Burnham has backfired spectacularly, creating a charisma vacuum that Reform UK is eager to fill, with Matt Goodwin, a GB News presenter and former academic, framing the by-election as a referendum on Starmer, while Labour voters feel abandoned by a party more focused on internal purges than heating bills or pints, in a seat where 25% identify as Muslim and 44% as ethnic minorities. The Greens sense opportunity, positioning themselves as the anti-reform alternative as Labour's vote collapses. And the fact that only Deputy Leader Lucy Powell supported Burnham underscores the one-team narrative Starmer is pushing in a House clearly divided. While the Green Party's major campaign push shows Labour's voters slipping away despite Starmer sending 400 MPs to knock on doors, many of whom may find angry constituents or empty houses, creating a circular firing squad where blame is ricocheting back at the Prime Minister, seen as reactive rather than proactive, insecure enough to block talent, and willing to sacrifice allies to survive one more news cycle, leaving a so-called sensible Labour government increasingly chaotic. And if Reeves goes, she won't go quietly. Described as a human shield for Starmer's incompetence, her departure will expose him in the middle of a battlefield with no cover, proving that signing her resignation may be the easy part, but surviving the fallout will be. The real test. One Labour MP recently said the government has gone from drowning to merely treading water in choppy seas. But the truth is, they aren't even treading water, they are being circled by sharks. And Starmer seems to think that if he throws enough of his friends to the predators, he might make it back to shore, yet the shore is miles away and he has run out of friends, with even the unions turning against him, as the head of Unison called the decision to block Burnham blatant gerrymandering. From the Canadian hub, the parallels are striking and alarming, essentially a high-stakes rehearsal of our own potential future, showing the same patterns of insulated leadership, desperate searches for scapegoats when policies fail at the kitchen table, and the same frustrating obsession with optics over outcomes, turning Westminster drama into a cautionary tale of a government losing its soul in pursuit of fiscal rules nobody asked for. And while Canada has its own versions of this sensible adult routine, leaders great at photo ops but struggling with reality, the Starmer method of blaming loyal lieutenants who have been taking the bullets for months is a global trend with a short shelf life, because eventually the room grows quiet when there is no one left to throw under the bus. And the upcoming Gorton and Denton result in Manchester will be the first real test of whether the public buys the "it's all the Chancellor's fault" narrative, or holds the man at the top accountable, proving that despite Canada's winter tyres and maple syrup, the underlying Westminster DNA is the same. Insulated leaders who ignore public outrage make politically suicidal decisions. And Starmer's move to block Andy Burnham is a textbook example of that centre knows best arrogance. It is exactly the kind of move that alienates the very regions you need to win. In Canada, ignoring the West or forgetting the Maritimes. In London, it's called Starmerism. And whatever you name it, it smells like an ivory tower on fire, with the Canadian connection being the erosion of trust. Because when Rachel Reeves stands at the dispatch box delivering a budget that feels like betrayal to the very people who voted for change, she isn't just failing at economics, she's failing at the basic contract of representative democracy. A feeling Canadians know well when the person in charge of the money seems more concerned with a few bond traders than the struggling households trying to heat their homes. And if Starmer thinks swapping Reeves for a different face will solve it, he's miscalculating the depth of public anger. It isn't about the face, it's about the bill. The great unravelling is visible in the sheer scale of fiscal failure. From a philosophy of pain now for more pain later, hitting small business owners in Manchester who survived the pandemic and the energy crisis only to be met with tax bills that look like phone numbers, with a 76% increase in business rates for pubs, not a rounding error, but a potential death sentence for the high street. Reeves's November 2025 budget, offering a 5p per pound discount, barely enough to buy a packet of crisps, while by April 2026 support vanishes, unless a desperate U-turn occurs, which led to a humiliating partial climb down on January 27, 2026, offering a 15% discount for pubs only and leaving restaurants and cafes to twist in the wind, as hospitality warned 30,000 venues could close, creating the legacy Starmer now wants to distance himself from, pretending it was Rachel's idea while he was busy looking prime ministerial in Beijing, though the public remembers who stood beside her at the dispatch box nodding along, remembers the hollow growth slogans that resulted in tax, 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 and remembers the slashing of winter fuel payments that struck at the heart of Labour's base, a cold technocratic move that backfired because it lacked basic human empathy, showing that when people are treated like spreadsheet entries, they stop voting for you and start looking for anyone with a pulse and a different plan, making Starmer's decision to move his economic advisors into. Number 10. The ultimate vote of no confidence. He is effectively setting up a shadow treasury staffed by people who answer only to him, a creeping marginalisation that has turned Rachel Reeves into a ghost in her own department, Chancellor in name only. While the Prime Minister's Chief Secretary, Darren Jones, is increasingly seen as the real power behind the velvet curtain, and this isn't just efficient governance, it is a hostile takeover of the most important department in the land. On the international stage, Starmer's January 2026 trip to China, meant to be his statesman moment showcasing Britain's return to sophisticated global diplomacy, was undermined by sidelining Reeves during planning and execution, leaving her to learn about the economic dialogue from the press, turning a diplomatic mission into domestic melodrama, while Starmer rubbed shoulders with Chinese officials as 50 Labour MPs signed protest letters over the Burnham snub, exposing cracks in the party wall that he tries to hold up with glossy press releases from Beijing. And the irony of Matt Goodwin being the favourite in Gorton and Denton cannot be overstated. A man who built a career calling the Westminster elite out of touch is handed the perfect campaign slogan on a silver platter as Labour, so afraid of a local hero like Andy Burnham, risks letting a Reform candidate win, leaving Goodwin embodying the protest vote in a seat with 44% ethnic minority population, where his controversial past comments would normally make him unelectable. Yet voters consumed by fury overlook baggage to punish the government. While the Green Party benefits from this anyone but Labour sentiment, framing the by-election as a fight between them and Reform and reducing Labour, the historic seat holder, to a third-party distraction. And as this deep dive into the shambles of the British government concludes, the question remains, what is left for Rachel Reeves? If she stays, she is a lame duck, a ghost haunting the Treasury, waiting for the inevitable reshuffle that will strip her of both title and power.